Hello there, I'm the Serial Plagiarist, and today I wanted to discuss the Clone Wars again, the most overbloated and overrated piece of Star Wars content, next to something like Andor. If you're a regular, you know that I think of the Clone Wars as a weak-willed, backtracking mess that tried to fix the prequel trilogy, but ended up creating more plot holes. There have been many who have tried to tell me that this isn't the case because George Lucas or Dave Filoni said this or that, but the thing is, I am hesitant to believe them in this case, because it's very clear from watching the Clone Wars that it changed the characters, the themes, and the setting of the prequel trilogy. Why the hell is Anakin made more mature and emotionally stable than his film counterpart? Why was he given a deeper voice? Why was he given an apprentice? All of which don't line up with the character seen in the movies. I think we all know the answer. But for the longest time, it was disguised as because it makes the movies better, or it enhances the movies. But let's be real, they completely abandoned the original story as it was told, and made these changes in hindsight. And the thing is, it's not just the fact that they retcon Anakin's knighting, or a bunch of other timeline changes. Sure, it's part of the problem, but I think what a lot of TCW defenders don't realize is that I'm unhappy with the Clone Wars because it changes the story. Anakin's arc no longer has the same meaning, and given the complete saga is essentially his story, I feel the changes, whether it be to his characterization, the addition of Ahsoka, or direct retcons like making him a Jedi Knight earlier, completely screw over the significance and quality of the story, and the message that is. I don't know about you, but I don't think we're supposed to admire a guy who is emotional, hot-headed, and acts without reason, and is prone to making selfish and destructive choices. I understand that a likable movie villain is a thing for a reason, but I feel for this specific story, with Anakin as the central character, his tragic fall from grace is meant to be met with scorn, and not, oh, this villain is so badass that he chokes incompetent henchmen, because I think there, we've become disillusioned with what the original story is meant to teach us. So it's not just retcons from the multimedia project, because I understand that the expanded universe was never set in stone, and was prone to making changes often, but it's rather how the story made for a weaker overall story. So with that out of the way, I think I've spent enough time attempting to explain my position, and how it's not just that Quinlan Vos was turned into Quinlan Lebowski. So let's see if ScreenCrush has anything to say that I haven't already refuted.
Today I'm going to talk about how the Clone Wars TV series not only fixed the Star Wars prequels, but the show is also a roadmap for how Lucasfilm should be treating the saga in the modern day.
I think you just made me throw up in my mouth.
Welcome back, ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Airy, and do you guys remember when fans hated the Star Wars prequels?
Yeah, I think that hatred was purely exaggerated by the media, and analyzing prequel hate today, very few of the criticisms actually made any sense. It was mostly whining that alleged racial stereotypes, bad acting, bad dialogue, blah blah blah, and none of it was actually an intellectual look at how the prequels ruined the story of Star Wars. Because newsflash, Metachlorians don't ruin Star Wars, because most of the hardline prequel haters don't even understand what Metachlorians are and how they work in the story, whether it be in the Phantom Menace itself or the complete saga. I think it got to the point where people were just convinced the prequels ruined Star Wars without any practical reasoning why. I also have to note that this isn't universally true whatsoever, because they love the Star Wars prequels in Russia, for example, and the excuse that the dubbing is excellent or whatever doesn't explain why hardline prequel haters in the West complain about everything else that wasn't the dialogue or how the characters sounded.
The intense backlash made Ahmad Best, Jake Lloyd, and Hayden Christensen essentially retire from acting. But today, go to any Star Wars celebration and those same actors get standing ovations.
Making me emotional.
So what changed? The Clone Wars fixed the story of the prequel trilogy.
And here, I'm already sick of this video. TCW fanboys say this constantly, and I have to point out, why is it always the Clone Wars show specifically, and not the Clone Wars multimedia project, which had a different story and approach to the Clone Wars? Why does a show fix a film retrospectively? What about those who loved the prequels before the Clone Wars came out? I didn't watch the Clone Wars until it was on Netflix. That was quite a bit after I saw the prequels for the first time.
So, we're going to explain how this series fixed each aspect of the prequels that fans hated.
Fixed or changed? because there's a difference between fixing something and changing something.
And how this incredible show gave those movies more context, character development, and they also retconned and fixed a lot of plot holes.
You heard it here. ScreenCrush admitted that the Clone Wars retconned the movies. And here I thought a lot of TCW fanboys argued how the Clone Wars didn't retcon the movies at all, even though they most certainly did.
Now, the Clone Wars were first mentioned in A New Hope.
You fought in the Clone Wars?
But we didn't actually hear about them again, technically until Attack of the Clones after the Battle of Geonosis.
Begun the Clone War has.
That's true for the main series, but I mean, we're talking about the Clone Wars, which is side content. So for the most part, this isn't even true. I really hate how people pretend that TCW is some definitive piece of content alongside the films, but then there's the Clone Wars multimedia project, which is either swept under the rug, or people are ignorant to its existence. Why in the hell is it TCW that gets all the fanfare, and not the multimedia project? The answer is accessibility. And I noticed that the more accessible something is, the more likely it is to shape someone's perception of a franchise. And I also keep saying that something like Republic is totally worth reading in its own right after you're done with the movies.
So with the clone troopers fully deployed and Count Dooku leading the Separatists, the end of Attack of the Clones set up a major story arc, the original galactic civil war that we have been imagining in our heads since 1977. But then Revenge of the Sith began 3 years after Attack of the Clones toward the tail end of the Clone Wars.
Yeah, I also have to highlight that the story of Star Wars was about Anakin's descent into Darth Vader and his eventual redemption. I think people expected so much backstory to be laid out when that wasn't even the goal of the prequels, because that was always for books and comics to expand upon. People tend to get sidetracked from the primary story and end up complaining that we don't see the entire Clone Wars. And there, they misunderstand what the story of the movies is actually about. I also love how these people shut off all the external material if it's in the form of a novel or comic book, just because it's not accessible enough for them.
So the movie opens with the Battle of Coruscant, which is one of the last major battles of the war. So by the middle of Revenge of the Sith, the Clone Wars ended when Obi-Wan kills General Grievous.
So uncivilized.
It was a bit of a bummer because the war happened almost entirely off screen. The Clone Wars are essential to understanding how the Jedi and the Republic fell, and we didn't get to see them.
Yeah, again, the priority of the movies was to tell Anakin Skywalker's story first and foremost. There's only so much a movie can show you, so I don't know what you were expecting.
In addition to skipping years of action-packed battles, this gap between movies also weakened the overall story of the prequels.
Yeah, I'm sorry that the prequels didn't spill absolutely everything out for you, even the shit that doesn't directly relate to Anakin Skywalker's story.
So let's talk about each element of the prequels that didn't work and how the Clone Wars enriched the story.
I'm sweating.
So let's start with the greatest character created for the Clone Wars series, Ahsoka Tano.
Oh, you're kidding me. You just made me throw up in my mouth again.
Well, look, Star Wars has always been a franchise known for retconning its universe. After all, they did make Luke and Leia brother and sister to wrap up a love triangle. That's real, look it up, I'm not making that up.
And here, Ryan is just another fool who thinks the main problem people have with the Clone Wars is that it retconned the movies. And yeah, that's part of the problem, but as I've been trying to emphasize for a while here, it's actually how those retcons fuck over the story and make it far weaker. Not just that one day, Anakin was a Jedi Knight midway through the Clone Wars, and now it's straight after Attack of the Clones.
But probably the greatest Star Wars retcon of all time was the introduction of Ahsoka Tano, who was Anakin Skywalker's previously unknown Jedi Padawan.
Who also didn't appear in the Clone Wars multimedia project, because it's clear that she was never a part of the story, until she was thrown in a few years after the saga concluded, and they tried to artificially make her important to the story but failed. I mean, it's hard not to be bitter when you analyze what Dave Filoni has done with the character after the Clone Wars.
So Ahsoka's existence completely rewrites the Star Wars timeline.
Spoiler alert, but this clown admits straight up that the Clone Wars rewrites and retcons absolutely everything. And I don't know what kind of argument he's trying to make, because that's the sort of thing the show's critics, including me, don't like. And as I've said before, the true problem is much deeper than even that.
Showing this headstrong Jedi have to grow by training an apprentice gave Anakin more depth. Throughout the arc of the show, we see Anakin grow attached to Ahsoka, the same kind of attachment that causes his fall, which we'll talk about in just a bit.
I sure the hell don't see why Ahsoka needed to be created to sell Anakin's possessiveness over those he cares about. Again, a completely shoehorned afterthought.
But more importantly, Ahsoka showed that you can introduce main characters outside of the movies.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Jax demonstrated that ever since the 1970s. What Ahsoka does is nothing unique or special. I also don't understand how this brings value to Anakin's character and the story in general.
She is the protagonist of this show.
A protagonist I got quite sick of, to say the least.
We begin with her as an annoying Padawan.
You're stuck with me, Sky Guy.
I think I almost died of cringe there.
And we see her grow into a teacher and a warrior that can kick Darth Maul's ass.
Yeah, about that. I've consistently criticized the Clone Wars, and Ahsoka specifically, for fucked up power scaling. That she's able to beat, or at the very least survive, against combatants like Darth Maul and General Grievous, despite clearly being outmatched and underpowered in both scenarios, and despite the fact that it should be a death sentence. People have objected to me calling Ahsoka a Mary Sue, but when it comes to her power scaling and her artificial bumped up strength and skill, she most definitely is. Don't debate me on that.
She even falls for a boy, Lux Bonteri, showing that she struggles with the same temptations that caused Anakin's fall.
I mean, not really. The pair only have like 2 episodes where they like each other. And then it's completely dropped in the Onderon arc, where Lux finds a new bitch, and Ahsoka doesn't really have much of a reaction whatsoever. I mean, that's at least how I remember it. And the thing is, what in the hell is the point of Lux Bonteri? That arsehole contributed absolutely nothing to Ahsoka's arc. I say that very loosely too.
Ahsoka is the relatable point of view character that the prequel trilogy lacked. I mean, no wonder Dave Filoni can't bring himself to kill the character off.
Ryan, listen here, and you better listen good. Dave Filoni's stubbornness to kill the character off has nothing to do with Ahsoka's quality or necessity to the larger story. She's still alive because she's supposed to hijack Anakin's story and turn that crap into the Ahsoka Tano story. It's why I in particular have ultimately rejected the character, because it's both an incompetent writer not knowing when to end his head honcho's story, but also trying to get said character to smear the screen with her orangeness. I haven't brought up the comics yet, but you'd be relieved how each of the mainline comic book series actually knew when to discontinue their characters. Zane Carrick, Quinlan Voss, Das Janier, Cade Skywalker. Their stories were lengthy, yes, but not overbloated. And the key important fact is that the writers actually knew when to end their stories. Technically, Das Janier was unfinished, but looking at the character's trajectory, he would have been given a complete arc, and then sidelined at best afterwards. It's actually a big reason why I prefer the old comics to Dave Filoni, because that dickhead just extends his major characters' lifespans beyond reason. Anyways, let's get on with it. Ryan actually plugs a breakfast cereal sponsorship, so let's just skip over that crap.
Now let's talk about the prequel problem with Palpatine.
Wait, there's a problem with Palpatine in the prequels?
So between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, Palpatine amassed considerable power by weaponizing the political system. But we didn't see that on screen.
So Jar Jar foolishly advocating for Palps to get emergency powers was off screen. Yeah, I don't think so.
Which makes everybody around Palpatine in the prequels seem to just be inept. To the audience, it was really obvious that Palpatine was a villain angling to take control of the Republic.
Well, no shit. The audience is let in on the bigger picture far more than the characters are. What's your point?
But in the Clone Wars, we saw Palpatine manipulate the government over the course of 7 seasons.
He does the same thing in the Clone Wars multimedia project, so that's nothing special or unique. And what do you know? The multimedia project had aspects to the manipulation that the 2008 show didn't even bother to think about. Such as how Palpatine heavily promoted Anakin as a war hero, by both getting the media to talk about him as the only good Jedi, and also manipulating which battles Anakin became involved in, given he was playing both sides, which is why Anakin was pulled out of the Battle of Jabim, because that was up to local militias and not the clone and droid army collectively. It was part of his ploy to manipulate the galaxy as a whole, as once he got Anakin fully on his side, they both would have been the 2 most popular beings in the galaxy, and would have made the denouncement of the New Order far harder. It kinda went to waste once Anakin was defeated on Mustafar, but still, the plan was made. I might have gotten a tad off topic, but the point is, the multimedia project had a lot more depth than its unworthy successor.
We see how he manipulated not just the Jedi and the Republic, but also Count Dooku and the Separatists. After all, Palpatine's plan was never really to keep Dooku as his apprentice.
So far, I'm just hearing generic statements about how TCW expanded on this or that. Yeah, it did, but it's nothing unique or special, given the multimedia project exists. Is this clan going to even bring up the micro series? It's the least you could do.
Now, ironically, getting this story right required a deeper dive into galactic politics after fans criticized the prequels for showing too much parliamentary procedure.
Oh yeah, I remember. Despite tons of other shit taking larger priority, fans actually thought that the films were bloated with politics, and that the politics detracted from the story. But then at the same time, they were too stupid to understand what a trade blockade was. Prequel hate was filled with double standards and contradictions like that. And that's why they're easy to laugh at, because once people actually used their heads, it was game over for them.
But with the Clone Wars, the nuances of Palpatine's political plot became clear, proving that the people around him weren't fools, they were lulled into serving him over time.
I still don't see how this expansion makes the Clone Wars stand out whatsoever. Especially again, because of the earlier example I keep citing.
Hell, at times, there were even Separatist and Republic senators like Mita Bonteri and Padme Amidala who entered into peace talks to end the war. And we see Palpatine squash these talks by assassinating Mita Bonteri and pinning blame on the Republic. This stokes the flames of violence, secures even more power for himself, and guaranteed that the war would continue.
You know, I don't know if the point has been made crystal clear yet, but this sort of crap was done before, done better, and the Clone Wars doesn't get any special credit for discussing this, because the films had enough. I don't know about you, but Palps didn't build his base in a weekend. It was gradual, like so many other things.
Also in the prequel trilogy, the Jedi, well, they looked like idiots.
Go to hell.
They worked closely with the Sith Lord for years, even following his orders as he acquired substantial power right under their noses.
Yeah? And what do you think the lesson here is? Don't become complacent or the return of evil will slip right under your noses and destroy you? I'm getting pretty sick of explaining basic story themes and morals to people like this, because it's clear they'll never get it anyways.
The Jedi also betrayed their own beliefs. Rather than remaining peacekeepers, they quickly became soldiers fighting a political war.
You know, I also have to point out that the Jedi couldn't just do nothing. As far as they understood what was going on, they couldn't just sit on their fat asses and let the Separatists claim territory. You know, I don't even understand what Ryan's point is supposed to be. I think he just missed the point in general.
The time jump between episodes 2 and 3 made this problem worse. On screen, the transition from poet monk to soldier happens at breakneck speed, with little explanation for why the Jedi have betrayed their values. The Clone Wars addressed these issues by showing how Palpatine trapped the Jedi. See, they saw the Republic as essential to maintaining peace in the galaxy, so when the Republic was threatened, they had to intervene.
You know, wasn't this already in the movies though? I remember reading the Shatterpoint novel, and the opening introduction, written by George Lucas, literally described all this as the opener to the multimedia project in general. And it was obviously going off the story themes of Attack of the Clones in general. How the Jedi saw the Republic as worth preserving, enough that they would step in as generals and whatnot.
Unfortunately, Palpatine anticipated that response and orchestrated the war to force the Jedi to gradually betray their values.
Yeah, not unique to the Clone Wars whatsoever, as I just explained.
Now, at first, the war made the Jedi seem like heroes, but as time went on, the galaxy and even some Jedi began to doubt what the Jedi stood for. We see this in the Clone Wars series, but not in the prequels.
So far, it just seems like Ryan is gawking over the Clone Wars adding some salt on the fries, which is so minimal that it actually makes it seem like a joke that that's the most the series came up with when it came to ideas on how to expand on the prequels. You know, I think I kind of preferred when the Clone Wars multimedia project both expanded on the movies and created new stories. Because the latter I don't think the Clone Wars 2008 did, for the most part.
For instance, we saw the Jedi Pog Krell become disillusioned with the Jedi Order and plan to not only abandon the Republic, but to join the Separatists as well.
Oh yeah, the idiot thought he could become Count Dooku's apprentice without even speaking to him first. That gaping hole in his plan really killed it for me.
I am no longer naive enough to be a Jedi.
We also see young Padawans like Ahsoka Tano and Barriss Offee on the front lines, and this emphasizes how far the Jedi had fallen. These benevolent peacekeepers used child soldiers to fight a war. Certain arcs even showed the kids being put into dangerous situations and treated like they're expendable cannon fodder.
Yeah, Ryan, Read the Battle of Jabeam arc. Do yourself a favor.
Like in Season 2, Episode 6, Weapons Factory. In that episode, Barriss Offee and Ahsoka are trapped under debris and they're near death. Barriss's Jedi Master, Luminara Unduli, discourages Anakin from trying to save them. Ironically, they only survive because of Anakin's attachment to Ahsoka.
Yeah, I think I would have given up on Ahsoka long ago if I were Anakin. The underage stripper wasn't worth it.
Palpatine also orchestrated public opinion to make himself seem like the true representative of the people and make the Jedi look like outsiders. Now, this happens with literally one speech in Revenge of the Sith, but in the show, we see glimpses of the public's turning opinions on the Jedi.
With the Jedi running around, starting war.
The fact you gotta showcase the Martez sisters says a lot.
Now, with this turn in opinion, if the Jedi were to oppose Palpatine, then their actions would look like treason.
The Chancellor's been elaborating on a plot by the Jedi to overthrow the Senate.
And by the time the war started, it was already too late for the Jedi.
You know, you also reminded me of the fact that fucking Yoda got a vision of Order 66 ahead of time, and did nothing to prepare or counteract that vision. God, I fucking loathe this show.
Now, you guys know how much we love Star Wars here at the channel, and that's why we love designing Star Wars parody shirts for our merch store.
Yeah, no thanks, buddy. And for fuck's sake, another advertisement? These clowns were really desperate to make money, despite their constant content rollout.